Well, let's continue with our focus on the story now and bring in Advocate Paul Hoffman. He is the Director of Accountability Now, as we continue to look into the many layers of what the Madlanga Commission will be dealing with and what this means for the SAPS and, of course, for the country. Advocate Hoffman, thanks for your time. You were listening to that package. That's but one story of a family who lost a loved one in a hail of bullets, one of those 121 dockets. You know, the Madlanga Commission is being called the biggest corruption inquiry in the country. Would you agree with that, coming out of the state capture inquiry?
Good morning, Michelle, and good morning to your viewers as well. I don't think it's the biggest. If you think about what came out of the Zondo Commission of Inquiry, you find that there were over 1,400 individuals and companies that were fingered by that inquiry. If we have 121 dockets that are still live in the KZN political killings task team, then the numbers don't stack up. But I do agree that this is an extremely important inquiry, even though the Commission has no more powers than to make findings of fact that bind nobody and give recommendations to the President, which he can either accept or reject or modify. So we mustn't put too much store in what can come out of a Commission of Inquiry. You go back in time, you'll know that the Sisi Khampepe Inquiry into the Scorpions said keep the Scorpions, and the government got rid of the Scorpions. The Marikana Commission of Inquiry into the shootings by police in Marikana said demilitarize the police and create proper public order policing. Well, we still don't have proper public order policing, and we still don't have a demilitarized police service. It looks more and more like a continuation of the police force of the old South Africa rather than a service for the public of the new South Africa.
But then again, Advocate Hoffman, what about I'm just trying to sort of link the importance of this inquiry to the overall state of the country and the levels of corruption that we are seeing. If what Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi says is true and there is political interference in the criminal justice system into the top echelons of government, that would go some way to explaining, it might go all the way to explaining why we haven't seen successful prosecutions following the state capture inquiry.
Yes, no, absolutely. And I think that is really a question of the structure and operations of the anti-corruption capacity of the state. These political killings are not done out of anger. They're done because either there's vengeance for corruption or prevention of the exposure of corruption. Corruption does feature, as you rightly point out in your question. But what the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry can do is look at the operations and the structure of the anti-corruption machinery of the South African state. I have to take you all the way back to March 2011, when the Constitutional Court did exactly this and came to the conclusion that our law demands that a body outside executive control deal effectively with corruption. Now, that hasn't happened in South Africa since 2011. That didn't happen before 2011 either. And that is at the heart of the problem that the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry will be addressing in the course of its hearings over the next days, weeks, and months. If the Minister of Police had no say over the anti-corruption machinery involved in investigating these political killings, he would not have been able to intervene, not legally anyway, and he would not have been able to order that the dockets be removed from KZN to Pretoria to gather dust on General Sibiya's desk. That issue is really at the core of what the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry will be addressing. It cannot possibly address the facts of each and every one of 121 dockets, because there are just too many witnesses and too many bodies involved there, and it has a 6-month time limit, which may be extended, but to go into 121 cases individually is really not the task at hand of the Commission.
I mean, it's a massive undertaking, isn't it, to try to get to the bottom of interference in prosecutions in the criminal justice system. Just that sentence alone carries so much weight, and I have serious doubts that 6 months will be enough time to get to the bottom of it. But something has to be done. When we think about whistleblowers in the country who are being killed on a whim because they're pointing out corruption, whether it's in the Gauteng Health Department or any other liquidators that are killed in their boardrooms. Gauteng Health has lost 20 billion rand to corruption in the past 10 years. It speaks to all of these issues. Yeah, it speaks to all of these issues. The Madlanga Inquiry has just under 148 million rand, which will be a bill that taxpayers will be footing. Will it be money well spent?
Well, if the Madlanga Commission takes advantage of the option given to it by the President to report at the end of next month, and if I was drafting that report, I would certainly draw attention to the fact that our anti-corruption machinery in South Africa is meant to be outside executive control. Members of cabinet should have nothing to do with the task of dealing effectively with the corrupt in our midst. And if it makes an interim report that says, well, there's a problem here because the findings of the Constitutional Court back in 2011 in the Glenister litigation have simply not been implemented properly at any time since then, and that is why we are facing this problem, then it is the task of Parliament to create a body of the kind that was ordered up by the Constitutional Court back in 2011. And if we do it that way round, it doesn't have to cost 148 million rand, and it can result in rapid reform. There is already legislation pending in Parliament that is aimed at creating a new Chapter 9 Anti-Corruption Commission, which will not be a commission of inquiry with no teeth, but a standing Chapter 9 commission like the Human Rights Commission and the Electoral Commission and the Office of the Public Protector and Auditor General. All of those function on a basis that they report to Parliament, not to the executive branch of government in any way, shape or form. And as a consequence of that reporting line, it is impossible for cabinet ministers to issue the sort of instruction that led to General Nkosazana standing in front of the cameras on the 6th of July this year and complaining bitterly that his work was being interfered with by the Minister of Police, who is now on gardening leave. If the structure of the anti-corruption forces in our criminal justice system had been as ordered by the court, this would not have happened at all, and there would be no Madlanga Commission of Inquiry.
Right. I mean, you've written about this extensively, Advocate Hoffman, and the fact of the matter is what the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry is being tasked to do is effectively what a functioning criminal justice system should do.
No, a Commission of Inquiry has not got any executive powers at all. All it does is it looks at a complicated set of facts, finds out what is the truth and what isn't to the best of its ability and not on a criminal law test at all. And then it makes recommendations to the President as to what should be done about what it finds out. Now, you don't need a lot of evidence to find out that the South African Criminal Justice Administration, insofar as it has an anti-corruption element to it, is not structured in the way that the court has ordered it to be structured. And that is the open sesame to to the, it's the key to the conundrum that the Commission is facing.
Can you clarify something for us, Advocate Hoffman? The powers, insofar as the powers of the Madlanga Commission is concerned, is the Commission, as part of its recommendations, once it gets to a point where it starts making recommendations, is it able to initiate prosecutions?
No, it's not. It's exactly the same as with the Zondo Commission. It's exactly the same as with the Marikana Commission. Those also looked into irregularities, criminal activity, shooting by the police at Marikana. And they found out what went on to the best of their ability on the basis of the evidence that was placed before them by the evidence leaders. And they didn't have to subject that evidence to a proof beyond reasonable doubt scrutiny that you would in a criminal case. And they then made recommendations on the basis of what they saw going on in what unfolded before them. Now, those recommendations, and indeed those findings of fact, bind nobody. They are there to give advice to the president. And the president then has to decide how he is going to act or react to the findings of the Commission of Inquiry. So if we go back to the Khampepe Commission of Inquiry as to whether or not to retain the Scorpions, Justice Khampepe said, let's retain the Scorpions. And Jacob Zuma's government said, no, we're not going to retain the Scorpions. If you go back to the Marikana Commission, which also had to do with what to do about criminality in the police, findings were made saying, listen, let's demilitarize the police. They're too trigger happy. Don't give them ranks of general. Don't put them into military uniforms. Let them become a service to the people of South Africa. That wasn't only a recommendation of the Marikana Commission. It was a recommendation in the National Development Plan, which preceded the Marikana Commission by several years. But I'm afraid if you look at the police today, they are highly militarized and somewhat trigger happy sometimes. If the recommendation of the Marikana Commission that a public order policing properly trained unit should be developed in South Africa, that recommendation was accepted by the government, but it has never been implemented. And when you ask why not, they say, well, we haven't got any money for that. That's why July 2021 was such a disaster. There was no public order policing to deploy in the riots that erupted after Jacob Zuma was sent to jail.
Mm. Yeah, and just exactly what you've outlined is the reason why, even heading into the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry tomorrow, I mean, if it does give us some sense into whether the police service is captured, whether it's corrupted by organized crime, there will certainly be value in exposing that. And Corruption Watch has said, you know, the only way it can be valuable is if there's accountability at the end of the process of this inquiry, whatever it does reveal. But the questions, Advocate Hoffman, that still remain about how much teeth the inquiry actually has, it speaks to why there is that sentiment, perhaps in public, that this is yet another commission of inquiry.
Yes, no, look, there's a level of desperation in the eyes of the public because of the history that I've just sketched in my previous answer to you. Do not set too much store by commissions of inquiry. People who are cynical about these processes, and I'm not one of them, say that a commission of inquiry is just a place to park a political hot potato until it cools off, and then you bring it out again and fudge the way forward. In this particular commission of inquiry, there's very clear judicial authority for the proposition that the executive should have nothing to do with anti-corruption work. And clearly, the political killings in KZN and elsewhere are fueled by corruption in whatever form. And that finding of the court has not been implemented, and it is something that the Madlanga Commission would do well to ram down the throat of the president and everybody else in the executive, because this entire commission would not have happened if Minister Mchunu had no business at all in giving the instruction that he gave on the 31st of December last year to close down the political killings task team and to remove the dockets from the investigating officers to languish in Pretoria. That's really the nub of the issue. If you work out why it happened the way it happened and address that why, then you can get yourself in a situation in which the Madlanga Commission says in its initial interim report, listen here, Houston, we have a problem. There is no compliance with the requirement that the police, insofar as they do anti-corruption work, should not be under the control of the executive. Those are the words of the Constitutional Court.
Yeah.
And they've never been implemented. Doesn't suit those in positions of power to so implement.
But Advocate Hoffman, you say you're not a cynic when it comes to commissions of inquiry. Why did it need to take the KZN Police Commissioner giving a bombshell media briefing flanked by security officials into corruption in the SAPS? The allegations of involvement of top government officials in organized crime. These are things, the corruption levels in the country have been as they are now for a very long time. Why did it have to take Mchunu giving a briefing for the Madlanga inquiry?
I think that you need to bear in mind that General Mkhwanazi appeared before the Parliamentary Police Committee in March this year. And he said there exactly what he said in his bombshell media briefing. And there was no reaction from government to what he revealed in March. And that is why he felt obliged to put on the show that was put on the 6th of July this year. And it had the desired effect because it got the executive, which is a different branch of government to Parliament, to sit up and pay attention. And to that extent, the Commission is a valuable step forward because the Commission is not involved in the nitty-gritty of running the police. It is at arm's length from that process. And if it looks at the process properly and recognizes the requirement of the law that corruption should be addressed by a body that is outside executive control,
Certainly.
then the medicine is to put the anti-corruption work of the state in the hands of a body like the Chapter 9 Anti-Corruption Commission, which is in the works. There are two bills in Parliament, one to establish it and another to enable it. Those bills have been on the table since last year in Parliament. And there is still, unfortunately, a lack of political appetite to get on with reforming the law in a way to bring it into line with what the court has told in binding terms the government to do. And really, when that is done, we will get out of the woods with this kind of problem.
I wonder whether that political will increase as we build up to the local government.